right, please be seated. The record should show that the jury has returned to open court. Lawyers and Mr. Burns are also present. We are ready to resume direct examination of Investigator Denlinger. You may proceed, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Denlinger, when we broke, we were talking about the collection of covert DNA from the three Burns brothers, and we had gotten through Ken. We're kind of wrapping up discussing collection from Don Burns. Is it your understanding from reference to the investigative file that the items that you described were collected from the garbage at Don Burns, excuse me, on October 26th of 2018?
Yes.
So at this point in time, you had collected covert DNA, as you described, from Kenneth Burns and Don Burns, is that right?
Correct.
I want to take you to October 29th, 2018. Do you remember what you did on that date?
That was the day we decided to try to collect some from Gerry Burns.
And what did you do then to attempt to collect covert DNA from Gerry Burns?
Myself, Investigator Freeberg, J.D. Smith rode with me, and Investigator Randy Jernigan. We went back to Manchester and conducted surveillance. That's when we, through part of that day, we saw Gerry go to the Pizza Ranch in Manchester.
Was that then around the lunch hour?
Yes.
When you saw Gerry Burns go to the Pizza Ranch in Manchester, what did you do next?
We parked at the Pizza Ranch. Myself and Investigator Freeberg and J.D. Smith went in, and we sat in the booth next to them. He was with his son at the time.
Now, you had access to driver's license photos before then, is that right?
Yes.
And were you confident then, based upon the driver's license photo that you had been able to observe in the surveillance that you conducted, that the individual who you sat next to, in the booth next to in Pizza Ranch, was indeed Gerry Burns?
Yes.
And at a later date, just fast forward briefly here, did you have an opportunity to speak personally with Gerry Burns?
I did.
And was the person you spoke with at a later date, December 19th of 2018, the same person that you saw in the Pizza Ranch restaurant on October 29th, 2018?
Yes.
And is that individual in the courtroom here today?
He is.
And would you please identify him then based upon his location and general description?
He's sitting at the defendant's table next to Attorney Spees, wearing a black suit.
In the middle of the table over here?
Yes, the middle.
Okay. Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness identified the defendant.
The record will reflect the identification.
Explain what happened next then as you were sitting in the Pizza Ranch restaurant with investigators Freeberg and J.D. Smith.
Investigator Freeberg and I sat on one side of our booth so that we could see them at the next booth over. One of the things that we were looking for ideally was a straw. It was going to be easy to collect, and we knew it would likely have DNA on it since it had been in their mouth. We noticed that Gerry Burns was drinking out of a plastic glass, and it had a clear straw in it, and his son's glass didn't have a straw in it at all, so it was kind of easy to keep track of. And so he got a couple drinks throughout his meal. We ate too. And then as soon as they were done eating, they exited the restaurant and were back in their car. At that time, I walked over to the table and took the glass back to our table. And Freeberg had put some gloves on, and he collected the straw, packaged it right into a bag, and we took it back to the police department.
Do you recall observing Mr. Burns, the defendant in this case, initially accessing the straw and how he did that?
No, just from my own experience with it. I don't recall exactly how he accessed the straw. I think it was one of those you push one and one straw comes out things, if I recall.
You didn't take it out of a paper?
Yeah, I'm having trouble remembering that at this point, but I don't recall exactly.
After you observed Mr. Burns using the straw, you testified that you then were able to access that straw?
Repeat that, please.
Yeah, after you observed Mr. Burns use the straw, then you were able to collect that straw?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And after that straw was collected and handed over to Investigator Freeberg and packaged, what'd you do with it next?
We took it back to the Cedar Rapids Police Department. We checked it into evidence, and then it was checked out by Investigator or ID Officer Kruger and taken to the DCI lab in Ankeny.
And as a result of this investigation, was that straw then sent to the DCI lab in Ankeny for testing?
Yes.
And when the results were received from the DNA analysis and profiling that took place of the straw taken from the beverage that you observed Gerry Burns drinking at the Pizza Ranch on October 29th of 2018, what plans were made next?
Well, we decided we needed a couple search warrants. One of them was going to be to collect directly from Gerry's mouth. So I drafted a search warrant for that. And then one of the other theories in the case is that he had cut himself while he was killing Michelle Martinko. So I wrote a search warrant to look at medical records from the Regional Medical Center in Manchester right around the time of her death, hoping to find some records that maybe he got treated for a cut or injury.
The search warrant in hand then to collect DNA from the defendant by DNA buccal swabs. What plans did you make in order to collect his DNA?
We decided that on December 19th, 2018, we were going to go, JD and I were going to go to his office and interview him and then just collect him at that time.
And we're going to get to the interview at a later date, but for now, when you made contact with Mr. Burns, were you able to collect DNA from him?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
I collected that through buccal swabs. So I brought a kit with me, which consisted of a couple, basically a long Q-tip. I put rubber gloves on. I collected from each side of the inside of his cheeks, and then I put those back into an envelope and sealed it. And it's a brand new envelope. And then those were given to Lieutenant Dostal, and then they were eventually taken to the DCI lab.
When you transported those, when they were taken, the buccal swab was collected, what did you do to make sure it was done in a way that preserved the integrity of the evidence on the buccal swab and made sure there was no tampering, altering, or substitution of the biologic evidence on it?
The swabs themselves are in a sealed package, so you have to rip it open as you're doing it, much like you would at a doctor's office if they were swabbing you for strep or something. So I didn't open those until I'm ready to collect them. I open them. I have rubber gloves on. We have brand new envelopes that we use. So we go to great lengths to make sure that nothing's being contaminated as much as possible.
And was the Was the individual that you collected the DNA from, the DNA buccal swab, the same individual that you identified here today as the defendant?
It was.
Okay. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time for Investigator Denlinger, subject to recall.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Investigator Denlinger, throughout the course of your testimony this morning, you have referred to efforts in your investigation to obtain DNA specimens to compare against the DNA specimen of the suspect. You recall that?
Yes.
And in fairness, you were obtaining DNA specimens to compare against the male profile from the spot on the dress identified as F5, right?
Correct.
So this was a suspect, not necessarily the suspect.
Correct.
So turning back to June of 2016, when you were making some preparations to look at the evidence from the Martinko investigation that had been saved at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, I think that you said that in June 2016, you and other members of the Cedar Rapids Police Department staff went to actually look at what was there, right?
Correct.
And during the course of this examination in June of 2016, you looked at the evidence and you repackaged it at that point, or had it repackaged?
Yes, correct.
The material that you looked at in June of 2016 was still in the packaging from Munters?
Correct.
And Munters, as you told the men and women of the jury, was a service that I think you described it as disaster relief, where they dried out what they could of this evidence, repackaged it, right?
Correct.
And the repackaging that Munters did was back into plastic bags?
Yes.
And could you tell from what you looked at in June of 2016 that some of this material had been waterlogged and maybe even moldy?
Yeah, the outside paper sack was discolored, so it looked like it had been exposed to humidity or water.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. If I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm going to show you, Investigator Denlinger, first of all, Exhibit B1. Take a minute to look at that and see if you know what that is.
That looks like the packaging outside of the Munters bag.
Okay. This would have been how it appeared to you when you looked at the Martinko evidence in June of 2016.
Correct. Minus the bag, of course.
Beg your pardon?
Minus the Munters bag, of course.
Sure. And Exhibit C1, same question. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, that looks like a photograph we took of the evidence once it was outside the packaging.
Okay. And do both of these photographs accurately portray the appearance of some of the items of evidence as you examined them in June of 2016?
Yes.
Okay. We offer defendants B1 and C1.
Any objection to B1 and C1?
No, Your Honor.
B1 and C1 will be received and made part of the record.
If we could permit the jury to see those exhibits, Your Honor, please.
You may publish.
Okay, taking a look at what's up on the screen there, Investigator Denlinger, I believe that is Exhibit B1. And could you just generally point out to the men and women of the jury the different stickers that are shown on Exhibit B1?
Well, the blue tape there says Iowa DCI Crime Laboratory. The red tape also Crime Laboratory tape. And then there's a CRPD evidence tag on it. And then there's just a variety of handwritten things on there also.
Yeah, and I think earlier in this trial we heard testimony from retired investigator Richard White and also from Investigator Murphy about some of the writing that they recalled making on the original packaging, right?
Correct.
And so some of this we can see in Exhibit B1, although now it's smeared either by water or time, right?
Correct.
And similarly, Exhibit C1. Again, this is a close-up of the, well, is this a close-up of the tag that Investigator White talked about? He didn't think it was his writing, but in any event, it was a tag back in 1980.
Correct.
And again, we see in the red writing at the top of Exhibit C1, it looks like the writing that Investigator Murphy had made when he examined the evidence back in 1996 or 7, right?
Correct.
Okay. And as you have told us, these are the bags that were inside the bags from Munters.
Correct.
And is that mold at the bottom of C1 there?
Yeah, I don't think I observed. Yeah, I don't recall if I really identified any mold or if I even knew what mold would look like on this as opposed to just, dirt or darkness. But it was discoloration for sure.
And it smelled, didn't it?
Yes.
Smelled like the Cedar River or something else?
It smelled like the flood.
Now, Munters, as you said, was a disaster restoration service. They weren't a specialized service that was used scientifically to preserve or restore scientific evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you repackage, I should ask you this, did you actually repackage the evidence or did you have someone else assist in doing that for you?
I don't recall. ID Officer McDaniel and I were together, so I'm not sure which one of us. We probably would have just thrown some tape on it as we resealed it. Wouldn't have. We definitely didn't discard the old packaging. We kept that.
All right. So diverting from your examination of the, you can take that down, thank you. Diverting from the examination that you did in June of 2016, you told us that you had learned about a new method for perhaps getting more information from DNA and recruited Parabon to assist you with that.
Yes.
You asked to have the, or did you arrange to have the Martinko dress, Exhibit 7, sent to DNA labs?
I sent it.
And it was still in the Cedar Rapids Police Department custody at that point?
Yes.
The packaging to send it to DNA labs, did you do the packaging or did you have someone assist you with that?
So in an effort to send it to the lab, we took it as is, so as or similar to this, over to FedEx. And then we just set it in a FedEx box, and then we sealed it up. So FedEx provided us the box and the tape and stuff. And so I didn't let the FedEx guy handle it or anything like that.
And it was sent to DNA labs, I think, from your testimony in July of 2016?
Yes.
And after DNA labs examined it, as you told the men and women of the jury, they took 4 additional cuttings around the spot that had been designated as F5.
Yes.
And those are the 4 cuttings like at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock on State's Exhibit number 7.
Correct.
They found no DNA.
Correct.
When this item was sent to DNA labs, was it then returned to you?
Correct.
Having found no DNA, did you arrange to have the dress resent to DNA labs?
No.
You had the cutting from F5 sent to DNA labs?
Correct.
Did you have the dress sent anywhere else between July of 2016 and the end of November 2016?
No.
Can you tell us who H. Caldwell is?
Harvey. Harvey Caldwell.
And who is Harvey Caldwell?
He's an officer at the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
Is he in the evidence section?
No, he works at, at that time, he was working at the front desk.
So between, do you know when the dress was returned from DNA labs?
No, not without reviewing a report or the evidence.
Would it have been about September of 2016?
Yes.
And what became of it after September of 2016?
It was put back in evidence.
And to your knowledge, how long did it remain there?
Until we got it back out to photograph it briefly, and then until court today.
Investigator Denlinger, was this dress unaccounted for a period of time at the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Was it unaccounted for?
Unaccounted for.
Not to my knowledge.
Isn't it a fact that this dress was found in a box on your desk for some period of time?
It was, Harvey put it on my desk.
When did Harvey put it on your desk?
Whatever day they got it back from FedEx.
Can you tell us who Sergeant Moyle is?
He's the evidence sergeant.
And was Sergeant Moyle trying to find this dress?
I don't know what he was doing. He was probably looking to put it back in evidence.
Okay. And didn't Sergeant Moyle find this dress sitting on your desk and not having any idea how long it had been there?
Yeah, that's what he put in the notes, but he could have just checked with Harvey.
Well, he put it in the notes because he didn't know where the dress was, didn't he?
He put it in the notes because he didn't know what day Harvey received it.
Well, he put in his notes that he had no idea how long it had been sitting on your desk.
Right, because he didn't ask Harvey when it showed up.
Let's turn to when you had contact with Parabon, okay?
Sure.
In your interaction with Parabon, you eventually, as you told the men and women of the jury, that you used information that had been compiled about the male profile on the spot F5 to assist them in preparing a phenotype or a picture of a suspected person, right?
Yes, they used the profile from F5 for that.
Okay. And then eventually you used the same service, Parabon, to upload genetic information from F5 to try to, as you said, trace down descendants or ancestors of the suspect.
Correct. They used the same phenotyping test they had previously done for snapshots, so they just used the same one for both.
You didn't have the permission of any of the people who were using GED match to get that information, did you?
No.
And you told us that there was an extraction sufficient to identify 4 branches of a family tree, and you said that you gathered information from 3 of those branches.
Yes.
Just as we've stipulated here today.
Correct.
Did you, in November of 2018, again photograph and photograph and examine the evidence?
Yes.
And again, this was information that Officer Eganhouse assisted you with?
He did.
And tell us who Officer Eganhouse is.
He's an identification officer with the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
And in the course of your looking at the evidence with Officer Eganhouse, you discovered that there was an evidence bag in there from a specimen of blood and urine from a murder victim unconnected to this investigation.
I don't know. Maybe it had been in the same box.
If I showed you Officer Eganhouse's memorandum of that incident, would you be able to remember?
Sure.
Permission of the court.
You may.
that help you remember about that incident?
Yes.
Okay. And does Officer Eganhouse reflect that when the evidence was being looked at in November 27, November 29, 2018, evidence connected to the Martinko case, that there was some other evidence from an unconnected investigation?
Correct. In the boxes. Munters probably just put a bunch of evidence back in the boxes and sent it back to us.
With that, Your Honor, no further questions of this witness.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Denlinger, with respect to the item you were just questioning about, the specimen kit of blood and urine from another homicide, to your recollection, was that contained within the same packaging as any of the items in the Martinko case, or
No.
a separate package?
No, it was a separate package.
Was that item at all in any way in a position where it was touching directly the other items involved in the Martinko homicide?
No. Everything's in those heat-sealed bags.
Can you find them? I think we may have some. As we talked about in your previous testimony, and you were asked about in cross-examination, the database GEDmatch, is that a public database?
Yep.
Okay. Is that something that you as an officer or any individual can get on to try to find people who may be your relatives or ancestors?
Yep, absolutely.
With respect to September of 2016, when you received the dress back from DNA Labs, or when the Cedar Rapids Police Department did, can you tell us about that day when you received the box and put it back into evidence?
Regarding Harvey receiving the box?
Yeah.
So Harvey works at the front desk. All FedEx packages come in, and he probably saw my name on it, walked it back, and set it on my desk. I'm sure I wasn't there that day, and then Dale came and got it. He was probably, I don't remember the circumstances on why it was, I don't think Harvey knew what it was. So he just set it on my desk, and Dale took it and put it back in evidence. But the detective bureau is secure. It's not like it's out in the public atrium or anything like that. And at that point, we had already found the useful information on it. DNA Labs had already explained to me that we're not going to find more DNA on it. It went through the flood. There was humidity. That's the reason we stopped testing when we did, because we knew there wasn't going to be any more DNA on it.
Tell us about that, if you would. You mentioned humidity. Did you learn through this process the effect that simply humidity might have on the presence of DNA?
Yeah. So, as you can see in some of these photos, although it potentially got wet, you can still read a lot of the writing on it. So I suspect it was probably on one of the higher shelves, and water is sloshing around below it. It's the middle of the summer. That room has no windows or ventilation, really, so it's going to be super hot in there. And when I explained this to Christine Harris at DNA Labs International, she says, well, I'm telling you, Matt, that's probably why we're not getting any DNA on it. And honestly, I don't think it would be fruitful to keep cutting the dress looking for it. I think she said humidity is one of DNA's worst enemies. So at that point, we obviously would hang on to the dress just for purposes like, to show a jury if need be.
You may approach witness, Your Honor.
You may.
This will be 17R. Just hand this to you, Investigator Denlinger, for identification purposes, and ask if you've seen that photograph before.
I have.
What is that depict?
This is a picture that ID Officer Eganhouse took in the fall of 2018. This is how Martinko evidence was kept. This is the box that came back from Munters with barcodes that, kind of identify it. And it has a pallet number, so they kept track of what pallet it was on. But we took the evidence out of boxes like this.
And when the items were returned from Munters after the flood, were they done so in these type of boxes?
Yes.
And were items from different investigations oftentimes combined within the same pallet or even the same box, although packaged separately?
Yes.
Move to admit state 17R, Your Honor.
Any objection to 17R?
mean,
Or if you need a chance to look at it?
No objection.
17R will be received and made part of the record.
And finally, just for the record, based upon your knowledge of the investigation, then had all the testing that resulted in any kind of DNA results on the dress been done prior to the flood of 2008?
Yes.
We have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Additional cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Investigator Denlinger, the exhibits you just shown us, 17R, with the box of Martinko evidence, is this the box that you and Officer Eganhouse were looking through in November of 2018?
Yes.
And in what box was this unconnected specimen of blood and urine found?
Well, you'd probably need to let me go through all the photos. That would help me. But I would guess maybe that box.
The Martinko box?
Sure.
I mean, you were there to look at the Martinko evidence and came upon this
Right.
other evidence.
Yes.
Turning back to Mr. Caldwell, or Officer Caldwell, he received the evidence from DNA Labs on November 9, 2016, didn't he? If I may approach her.
You may.
I'm showing you the FedEx tracking information for that shipment from DNA Labs.
Okay.
And it was addressed to you, right?
Yes.
And delivered on November 9,
Yes.
2016, and signed for by H. Caldwell.
Correct.
And it was on November 21, 2016, that Sergeant Moyle found this box on your desk, right?
Correct.
No other questions? Thank you, Gerry.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Investigator Denlinger. You may step down.
Thank you.
State may call its next witness.
State calls David Dostal.
Good morning. Please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and be seated. There are just a couple of rules in the courtroom. Please wait for the attorneys to finish any question before you begin your answer. I'm going to ask them to give you the same courtesy to allow you to finish your answer before they ask a second question. Also be mindful of that microphone that's in front of you. We want to make sure that everyone can hear you.
Sure.
All right? Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
It's David Dostal, D-A-V-I-D. Last name is D-O-S-T-A-L.
Thank you. You may conduct your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is your current occupation?
I am a lieutenant with the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
And what kind of positions have you held with the police department?
I've been a patrol officer. I've been assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force. I've been a patrol sergeant. I also was a sergeant that oversaw our narcotics unit. I was promoted to lieutenant, and I was a patrol lieutenant. I oversaw a shift, and then my recent assignment is I'm the lieutenant in investigations.
And was that your assignment as of December 19th of 2018?
Yes.
On that date, on December 19th of 2018, were you involved in, actively involved in the investigation of the death of Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
And what was your role or your contribution at that point in time to the investigation?
At that time, I was basically the commander that oversaw the operation in which we were going up to Manchester to have two investigators interview Gerry Burns. I kind of coordinated some of the resources and just oversaw the time we were up in Manchester.
As a result of events that transpired that day, some of what we've heard about here, did you obtain custody of the known buccal swabs of Gerry Burns?
I did.
And who did you receive that from?
I received those from Investigator Matt Denlinger.
What did you do with, well, first of all, in what packaging or what kind of condition did you receive those?
The swabs were placed in a, I'm going to say, medium-sized manila envelope that the flap would fold over, and then it had like a metal clasp to secure it. That is how I obtained it from Investigator Denlinger at the time. And then I held on to it, and I was going to meet up with a crime scene unit investigator to pass off that evidence to him so we could get it to the lab, DCI lab.
And did you do that?
I did.
Who did you hand off that to?
That event, ultimately, I met up with Investigator Kraig Kruger. He's a crime scene unit investigator. I met up with him. I wanted to get an evidence seal to put over the flap. I was going to initial that or whatnot. When I met up with him, he did not have one, so I maintained custody of the envelope. I met up with another investigator a short ways away. He did have a evidence label, and after I obtained it from him, I put the evidence label on the folded over flap. I initialed it, and ultimately I gave it off to Investigator Kraig Kruger.
And while you were in custody of the known buccal swabs of Gerry Burns, did you handle those in a way to make sure that the integrity of the biologic evidence on those was secured?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
No questions necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
State may call its next witness.
State calls Kraig Kruger, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Kruger. Please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and take a seat. When you come into the courtroom, Mr. Kruger, there are just a couple of rules. I would ask you to please pause after each of the attorneys finishes any question. Take a deep breath and then give us your answer so that we're sure to hear what you'd have to tell us. I'm going to ask the attorneys to give you the same courtesy to have a bit of a pause at the conclusion of your answer before they ask the next question. Also be aware of that microphone that's right in front of you so that we're able to hear your testimony as you give it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Kraig Kruger, Kraig, Kruger.
Thank you. You may conduct your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is your current occupation?
I'm a crime scene investigator with the City of Cedar Rapids Police Department
How long have you been with the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
for 20 years.
And what kind of positions have you held with the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
For approximately 15 years, I was uniform patrol. The last 2 of those years, I was an ASAP officer processing intoxicated drivers, and then I was assigned to the Investigator Bureau with crime scene.
Is that the current assignment that you have?
Yes, it is.
Is that also known as an identification officer, or are you technically a crime scene officer?
Crime scene investigator. ID officer was a promoted position.
In your position as a crime scene investigator, does that involve the preparation, packaging, and delivery of items of evidence collected by the Cedar Rapids Police Department to the DCI laboratory for further analysis, including DNA, forensic analysis, and profiling?
Yes, that's included.
And were you working in that position on or about October, November, and December 2018 into January and February of, 2018 into January and February of 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can you describe the processes involved in taking items of evidence to the DCI crime lab for chemical analysis or for DNA forensic analysis?
We fill out a pre-log for those items that need further tested beyond our abilities at our crime lab, and they are checked out to whomever transports them to the state lab. Our evidence bureau many times checks it out to myself, and I transport it, hand deliver it to the evidence bureau at the DCI.
May I approach a witness, Your Honor?
You may.
You hand the witness what's been marked as State's Exhibit 11A and ask you, Investigator Kruger, if you see your name indicated on this exhibit.
Yes, I do.
Okay. On or about October 30th of 2018, did you deliver the following items of evidence to the DCI lab for analysis in connection with the investigation of the cold case homicide of Michelle Martinko, to include items in that report?
Yes, I did.
And did that include items assigned lab number 49, agency number JB1, a straw described as straw collected immediately after being used by Gerry Burns?
Yes.
And did you also deliver item lab number 50, agency number D, dog, B as in boy, 1A1, straw with lid collected from the garbage of Donald Burns?
Yes.
And did you also deliver lab number 51, agency number D, B as in boy, 1, B as in boy, drinking glass collected after being used by Donald Burns?
Yes.
And did you also deliver lab number 52, agency number D as in dog, B as in boy, 1, C, bandage with blood collected from garbage of Donald Burns?
Yes.
Did you also deliver lab number 53, agency number D as in dog, B as in boy, 1, D as in dog, described as a toothbrush collected from the garbage of Donald Burns?
Yes, I did.
And did you follow the proper procedure and protocol for the delivery of these items to ensure the integrity of the items remained intact with no alteration, tampering, or substitution taking place?
I did.
And did you turn those items over to the custody of Stacy Prall, last name P-R-A-L-L, of the DCI lab, an evidence technician?
Yes.
Is this a record that's kept in the regular course of business activity meant to document the delivery of these items to their custody?
Yes, they are.
Approach the witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
Okay, the witness must be marked as State's Exhibit 11C for further discussion and identification. Did you have a chance to review that, Investigator Kruger?
Yes, I did.
Does that document also contain your name?
It does.
On or about or on December 19th, 2018, did you deliver an item containing known buccal swabs from Gerry Linn Burns to the DCI lab for analysis in connection with the investigation of the cold case homicide of Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
And does State's Exhibit 11C describe those items in note your delivery of those items to Nichole Coffman of the DCI lab?
Yes.
Did you follow the proper procedure and protocol for delivery of those items to ensure the integrity of the items remained intact and that there was no alteration, tampering, or substitution?
I did.
Is this also a record kept in the regular business activity of the Cedar Rapids Police Department and the DCI lab meant to document the delivery of these items to their custody?
Yes.
Approach witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
Any what's been marked as State's Exhibit 11D. I ask you, Investigator Kruger, if you also see your name on this document.
I do.
On or about February 8th of 2019, did you deliver the items described in that document to the DCI laboratory for analysis in connection with the investigation of the cold case of Michelle Martinko?
I did.
Did you follow the proper procedure and protocol for the delivery of these items to ensure integrity of the items remained intact with no alteration, tampering, or substitution taking place?
Yes.
And did you turn over those items to the custody of Melissa Osmick, an evidence technician of the DCI lab?
Yes, I did.
Is this also a record kept in the regular course of business activity with the Cedar Rapids Police Department and the DCI lab meant to further document the delivery of these items to their custody?
It is.
Approach witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
And does this include item number, lab number 55, agency number D as in dog, B as in boy, 2, known buccal swabs of Donald Burns?
Yes, it does.
And does it also contain lab number 56, agency number K, B as in boy, 2, known buccal swabs of Kenneth Burns?
Yes.
And were those items and all these reports then turned over to the DCI lab for further analysis of DNA testing and forensic profiling.
There were.
That's all I have for this witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
But just briefly, Officer Kruger, in your training and experience at the Cedar Rapids Police Department or in other law enforcement contexts, would you agree with testimony earlier in this case that the bundling together of individual items of evidence containing biologic material is not good practice?
From my training, yes.
Yes. You would agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
And does that training indicate the importance of ensuring that items containing biological evidence from different persons not be bundled together?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further from this witness,
Nothing
Mr.
else. Thank you.
Spees? Thank you, Mr. Kruger. You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
Okay, did you hang on to those? I got it. All right, state calls Nichole Coffman, Your Honor.
Good morning. Please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and be seated. Just want to remind you of a couple of rules we have in the courtroom. Please make sure that you pause after the attorneys finish asking a question before you begin your answer. They will give you the same courtesy of making sure that you finish before they begin speaking. Also, obviously, there's a microphone right in front of you, and we have that there so that we can all hear you. So
thank
if
you.
anyone has trouble hearing you, I will ask you to adjust it, but I think you should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names.
Nichole Coffman, Nichole
Thank you. You may conduct your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Coffman, what is your current occupation?
I'm an evidence technician with the Division of Criminal Investigation.
Can you describe for us the duties of an evidence technician for the DCI?
We receive and maintain the evidence that's submitted for cases, not necessarily all cases or all items in all cases, but the ones that are submitted come into the lab, and those are taken in by evidence technicians prior to being tested by the criminalists.
What procedures and protocol do you use to ensure that items of evidence that are placed into your custody by law enforcement personnel are handled to ensure the integrity of the items and to keep them intact so there's no alteration, tampering, or substitution?
We have a list of what we call submission guidelines. They're on our website as well as we can verbally tell them, the officers, that we ask that all items submitted to the lab be properly sealed, which means either a heat seal, evidence tape, or a self-sealing item. They're dated and initialed to prevent any kind of leaking, any kind of access to the actual evidence before it's brought into the lab.
Were those procedures and protocol in place on or about October 30th and October 26th, 2018?
Yes, sir.
I approach witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Handing the witness what's been marked as State's Exhibit 11C. Ask Ms. Coffman if you had a chance to look at that prior to today.
I have not. No.
If you take a look at it, can you tell me if your name is indicated on that form or on that report exhibit?
Yes, it is.
Does this indicate that you received an item of evidence from the Cedar Rapids Police Department in connection with the case they were investigating, that the victim of Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
Does this indicate that on December 19th of 2018, Kraig Kruger with the Cedar Rapids Police Department submitted to you an item described as lab number 54, agency number J, B as in boy 2, containing known buccal swabs from Gerry, Denlinger?
Yes, it does.
Does this indicate then that the items were received on that date therein and then placed into a secure location at the DCI lab pending further examination and testing by a criminalist?
That report you show me doesn't show that, but yes, that was what happened.
Okay. And have you been able to confirm through documentation that that's what happened in this case?
Yes, I have.
And by virtue of the existence of this documentation, does that ensure that the proper procedures and protocol were followed in receiving and preserving that evidence for a criminalist to review?
It does. We document anything that may be a discrepancy that is different from what the officers say they're bringing to us, whether it's packaging or if there is anything open, it's immediately a phone call to the agency to discuss what we have to make sure nothing was lost, especially if it comes to us through mail or courier, which did not happen in this case. It was hand-delivered. Everything that item said, how it was delivered was the way it was. That was, and actually, if I remember correctly, that item, the buccal swab for Mr. Burns, was hand-delivered to me, and as soon as I verified the contents and the information, it was transferred to the custody of Michael Schmidt, who is the criminalist who tested it.
I approach witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
Before I do that, who is Melissa Osmond?
She's also an evidence technician.
And to your knowledge, has she been trained in the same procedures as you that you use at the lab?
Yes, she has.
Okay. And what's been marked as 1701. And I ask you, Ms. Coffman, if you've seen that or are familiar with what this document is?
Yes, I have.
What is this document?
It's our chain of custody. It shows the actual location of the items brought in, each individually, both date and time stamped for every move that it makes from the time that it comes into the lab to the time that it leaves.
Okay. And does this document indicate to you chain of custody in regards to an exhibit described as item I
Yes,
in connection with the same case number as what we've been talking about?
correct, yes.
And does this indicate some activity taking place with item I in regards to March 15th of 2019?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's,
Or actually, is this a fair and accurate copy of this record and that's kept in regular course of business activity?
yes.
Move to amend 1701.
Mr. Spees, have you had an opportunity to inspect proposed exhibit 1701?
I have, no objection.
1701 will be received and made part of the record.
What does this indicate as far as activity with exhibit I?
This is indicating that it was sent via FedEx to an independent lab for testing.
Is this meant to document that activity taking place with respect to exhibit I leaving the laboratory and being sent via that method?
Yes, again, every move that the items make, whether it's coming in or coming out or anything in between, it's all logged.
That's all I have for now, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
No questions for this witness, thank you.
Thank you. You are excused. Thank you. Once again, the attorneys have perfect timing. It's an appropriate time to take our lunch break. We will be in recess for 90 minutes, planned to be back here at 1:30. And as always, bear in mind that admonition to keep an open mind, not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, or permit anyone to speak to you about the case. We'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you.